Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.com here at the Steam VR Developer Showcase. The next game I'm going to try is The Gallery, Call of the Starseed. It's an adventure game in VR. Let's go try the game, chat with the developer, and give you some impressions. So now I'm joined by Danny Unger, CEO of Cloudhead Games. The Gallery is your guys' games. You guys have been making it for a while, even before you guys even had access to HTC Vive. It's an adventure game. Tell us about the concept and how things have changed over the years in your development.
Yeah, it's kind of like a Goonies 80s adventure. It's meant to be really accessible and kind of comforting in a way, because VR is a very overwhelming experience, especially for first timers. We wanted something that felt familiar and safe initially. So we started with the DK1 3 years ago with Oculus, and every time the hardware changed, we had to kind of refactor and rebuild systems because every new generation gave us new capabilities within the system. So having access to a full room scale was a real eye-opening moment for us, because it was the first time we really had access to something that was tantamount to the holodeck, and building a system that allowed you to freely move around physically and then basically project your virtual bounds deeper into 3D space was kind of the big challenge, and how to make that feel comfortable.
Does that affect the gameplay, or is it more of comfort? Because you have a teleportation mechanic in here, and I imagine even if someone was playing it sitting down or just standing up with limited walk-around space, you could play the gallery without any much problem. You teleportating it's comfortable.
Yeah. So yeah, getting around vestibular disconnect and vection issues was really key to building this system, because you can't have a bad first VR experience. You need people to have that comfortable, accessible experience. So we built it so that it would scale to any room size. So when you first calibrate, you can kind of determine how big the area is. So we made our locomotion system scale to that as well. So if you only have like 6 by 6 feet in front of your desk or whatever, you can play the game that way. But if you have a bigger space, obviously you can do that as well. Like if you have a warehouse, you could do that. It just keeps scaling, which is really interesting because it creates all kinds of new design problems. Like what happens when a person walks through a virtual wall, for example,
or an elevation, because even in your game, in the demo I played, there are elevations, hills, downhill, uphill, and there are gradients. If you're playing in a room that's 10 by 10, the fireplace is fine to walk around, but once you're walking down a path, it's almost easier just to teleport past it.
Yeah, it's true. You kind of want to maintain that balance of giving the user the feeling that they have the freedom to physically move, and then also just kind of traverse in an elegant way that doesn't feel uncomfortable.
Also, it's an adventure game, so you're encouraged to look around and explore. Now, traditional adventure games, whether they're 2D or 3D rendered on a 2D screen, users are trained mentally to look around, look up and down. With here, do you find that you're playtesting, it's tough to get users to want to look up and look behind them and look in corners and find things?
We tried to tutorialize some of those moments so you got used to interacting in that way. I think what the big eye-opener is when people realize they can actually sit on the floor or lie down. It opens their eyes to, oh, wait a minute, I'm missing a huge component of what this experience actually is. With that freedom, as designers, we can put little details in areas we never could before, right? So it really opens up the possibilities and the wonder of what VR really wants to deliver on. It makes it real.
It's also scary because you can put it in a virtual chair and people are going to want to sit in it, but then they can't. Lying down and look at the stars, that's great. But again, every time that you feel disconnected from the real world, what you know of physics and what you know of objects, that can take you out of the game.
Yeah, so a good example of that is we used to have, we have lawn chairs on the beach, and people would pick them up and they'd set them down and they would try to sit on them sometimes. So we kind of constrain the interaction so you can't actually pick it up. So just thinking about objects in that way and safety, that's definitely a part of the design process, yeah.
You also have an inventory management system. You actually reach around, pull a backpack in front of you, and then you see a floating inventory. You're asking the user to do a bunch of different actions. Of course, the controller, the Vive controller, Oculus controller, a bunch of buttons. Is there a limit to how many buttons and actions a user can want to do, or that you find that it's comfortable in VR?
Yeah, I think the more fidelity we have with tracking, it's better to kind of hinge on abstractions, or kind of actually to get away from abstractions. So if you have a menu system, why not make it physical? Like something it's a gestural type of experience. Really funny design challenges with that too. Like, how do you do an in-game menu in VR? So in the backpack, we have a menu boy. It's like a little handheld thing, and you can actually do all your menu settings in there. All kinds of really strange accommodations for what this new medium is. The fewer buttons you have to worry about, the better. Generally, you want to make everything natural and intuitive.
You want to be based on actions like your hands, and something that you're not abstracting is your elbows. You're not doing any inverse kinematics. There is a representation of your hand. Now, the Vive controller isn't perfectly ergonomic. It's not that resting pose. Yeah. You're still gripping a wand. Do you find any disconnect there, or anything that you find it's interesting in the development of having an avatar, hand avatar?
Yeah, so when we first started, we actually had full body persistence. We had an IK rig, and that made sense, and it felt okay when we were just using game pads, and we were using Razer Hydra very early on as kind of a surrogate for figuring out what felt okay. But as the technology scaled and we hit 90 frames a second and we got full, room tracking, the fidelity of that experience makes a fake IK system feel, it feels like you're in a crippled body, because if it's not perfectly mimicking what your real body is doing, it just doesn't work. And no IK system right now, even with the best kind of predictive simulation, does a good job of figuring out where your elbows are and where your route tracking is. Like, we did all kinds of crazy stuff, like built simulated route tracking systems, and we tried really hard to make body persistence a thing. But the truth is, until we have extra tracking capability on those parts of our body, it isn't going to happen. It will happen, but it's going to take time.
But what you do have are virtual actors, characters that are performed, and with that performance capture, you can also do that with the game hardware, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we actually did a thing recently where we allowed the actors to wear VR. We call it VR performance capture. So we put them in a perception neuron rig, which is an EMU-based tracking system. No cameras are involved, and we let the actor wear the headset and then do their scene. So they were actually in the scene. They had no imagination required, and that was a really cool moment. We think it's the first time it's been done, actually. But I think a lot of studios are going to kind of adopt that strategy for capturing performance.
Maintains at least line of sight and looking at objects. But it's interesting, you're not using the Vive controllers to performance capture. You're actually still using an external system.
Yes. Yeah, I think the Vive system, there's a lot of potential for expanding the number of sensors you could use. I hope to see that in future, because that would really open up the door for anybody to kind of capture performances and to hinge an avatar onto.
What I got was just like a 15-minute demo. It's a little bit of the puzzles. How big and how deep is the gallery going to be?
Yeah, it's between a 2 and 3 hour experience. It's kind of like being a part of a great movie, So it's episodic. It's 4 episodes. The first one is Gallery Call of the Starseed, which is a launch title for the HTC Vive. We're also going to port to Oculus Touch. And we'll see about PlayStation. There's different design challenges with each platform. So we're trying not to, step away from the core of the experience, which is to really put people in a new place and feel like you've been teleported somewhere and have a great adventure.
And as a developer, are you experimenting with interesting ways to manage the cables, for example, so that you can play just by yourself and not step over anything?
This is really interesting. I like to call it cable gate, because everybody goes on and on about the cable. The cable. We're going to get there. Eventually we'll have wireless when we can transmit data that quickly. But funny enough, we've given like 5,000 demos, no lie, and what is best is actually letting the user manage their own cable. I've seen a lot of people try to manage a cable for a user, but what is more natural is just to let it hang from the back of their head, and you get very quickly this cable sense, this sort of sixth sense about where the cable is in your local space, and you just kind of forget it's there after a couple times.
I can't wait to try out the gallery when it comes out in full with the HTC Vive. Thank you so much, Denny.
Thank you, Norm.
It's great chatting with you.
Yeah, you too.